Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm joined by my friend Andrew C. McCarthy. Andrew is a real live prosecutor, and he's a smart guy, and we agree most of the time. Sometimes we disagree. But Andy, you're the prosecutor. I'm the professor. We're both pundits. I want to start from left field before we get to the terrorism and Tesla cases. A law student sent to me a case this morning, Foote v. Ludlow School Committee, and it's F-O-O-T-E versus Ludlow School Committee. I put it on my X account. It was handed down by the First Circuit on February the 18th, and the three judges are two Biden judges with, I think, a total of less than 4 years on the bench, and an Obama judge. And they absolutely willfully disregard on-point Supreme Court precedent about the rights of parents to be involved in the decisions affecting their children. And this school district concealed from parents gender transitioning of their children after they'd been specifically directed by the parents not to do so, not to talk about them. And the judges excuse it. That's a very short. Are you shocked by that, like I'm shocked by that?
I wish I was, Hugh. I happen to be talking to you today from the National Review Institute Ideas Summit in Washington, so I got to be on a panel this morning where we were batting around some constitutional stuff, and I was asked about, like, what's changed in the culture of the law since I was a young prosecutor. And I think a big part of what's changed is judges used to care, particularly progressive judges, used to care a lot more about getting the answer right and about the possibility of being reversed. When I was a young prosecutor, nothing seemed to strike fear in a judge's heart more than the idea that you would be reversed, because it was kind of they even thought about it among themselves as kind of a barometer of their skill. And I think now that culture, which I thought was very important to the legitimacy, the integrity of the court, the way that we look up to the court in many ways, and I wish we were still there. Now they make decisions almost as if they're auditioning to be the next crazy lefty judge on the next highest court. And it almost seems to me like they revel in putting aside or disregarding precedent, that they revel in the idea that the Supreme Court is Trump's Supreme Court, and therefore, because it's conservative, how legitimate are its rulings anyway? And I just think it's not only a crazy way to go about the law, it's playing with fire with something that we should be trying very hard to preserve, which is the legitimacy of the court.
I wrote a column for Fox News this morning called "The Resistance." The Resistance in Robes, and I agree with the Chief Justice that we ought not to throw around impeachment. That's not the way to do it. But I do look at a decision like this decision, which is just so obviously wrong, and I rarely say that, right? That's going way on a limb. This is going to get reversed. I want the Supreme Court to expedite review of this. I want this sent right back down so that a message is sent to these judges and other judges that the court is not going to put up with. These are precedents that are 100 years old, the right to control the upbringing of your children. I am shocked. I'm kind of shaken, actually, because I've been out there on the point defending the Chief Justice in his defense of judges against demands of impeachment. By the way, where are you on that discussion, Andy?
I agree with what, well, let me put it this way. I agree with the Chief Justice that we shouldn't be jumping from zero to impeachment in 2 seconds. I've always been a doubter on the doctrine that judges can't be impeached for any reason other than, corrupt misconduct. I don't believe that that's true of other officials in the government. For example, I think if a president was grossly incompetent to the point where it put the nation in danger for national security purposes, that he could be impeachable even if he hadn't been corrupt. And I do think that, when we're talking about the kind of decisions you're talking about, now maybe someone has a one-off, but if you have a pattern of those kinds of decisions, you should not be on the bench.
Well, okay, I've always been. It was a good thing that the Jefferson Republicans did not remove Justice Chase because we would have politicized the bench. But this, I'm really shaken by this decision. It's so bad. And I do believe a rebuke is in order. We're going to go to a break, Andy. I'm going to talk to you about Tesla terrorism during the break, and then come back with you on the other side and talk with you about what do we do about the resistance in robes. From the National Review Summit, Andrew C. McCarthy, Fox News contributor extraordinaire, National Review editor. Follow him on X at Andrew C. McCarthy and listen to his podcast because there's so much going on. He and Rich Lowry are doing a public service with the McCarthy Report. Stay tuned. I'm back with Andrew C. McCarthy. Andrew, you know, the only thing I've ever prosecuted is a warrant. I haven't prosecuted a parked car ticket. You are a real prosecutor. There were these 3 attacks on Tesla stations using Molotov cocktails. And I went on Fox this morning. I said, look, 18 U.S.C. 2331. The elements aren't very difficult. I sure hope they move fast. By the time I get to the studio, they've arrested defendants in Loveland, Colorado, also had an AR-15 and Molotov cocktails. Charleston, South Carolina, Molotov cocktails. And the third one is in Salem, Oregon, AR-15. I'm impressed. I want to take my hat off to the men and women of the Bureau for getting these 3 people that quickly. Are you impressed?
I'm always hesitant to be too impressed by that, Hugh. And I of course, if it came out that they got them because of amazing forensic work, that would be great. I had the experience of the World Trade Center bombing, where they kind of took a victory lap because they solved it in 6 days. But it turned out that the reason they solved it in 6 days was because we had an investigation into the guys who did it, and we let the main informant out of it.
Oh.
So I want to hear all the. I'm not trying to. I don't want to cast any aspersions, but you asked.
No, well, that is a great caution. That's why you're a prosecutor and I'm a professor. Let me talk about the connection, though, between rapid prosecution following the event. Does that, in your opinion, increase deterrent impact of the prosecution?
Yes, I think that some prosecutions are going to be unavoidably lengthy because the sheer amount of discovery, and particularly if it's in a foreign language, like if it's a foreign terrorism case, it's hard to get that to trial quick. If there's classified information, as you and I talked about during the Trump investigations, those cases are very hard to get to trial. But if it's straightforward and they're American defendants who speak English, and I think you don't want to overcomplicate those cases. Get them to trial.
Now, do you think, Andy, you're younger than I am, so you probably don't even have the tiny memories of the SDS bombing summer or the summer of rage in Chicago. But do you
yeah.
Oh, you do? Do you think we're on the cusp of that again?
I've been worried about that for a long time, but I don't want to be a hysterion because, notwithstanding my worries, we haven't seen it. But I do worry about it. It was very formative for me. I'm not quite your age, but I'm close. So it was a formative experience for me. And I did, by the way, Hugh, I think you read this book as well, but I reviewed Brian Burroughs' Great Days of Rage.
Oh, yes.
Book
Yes.
For National Review, which is I thought it was a great compendium of that whole period.
It was so crazy. We don't want to go back there. The summer of George
Right.
Floyd was bad enough, but the Tesla bombings, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about the Santa Barbara Bank building and University of Wisconsin at Madison and the New York City townhouse blowing up and the weathermen. And man, we just do not want to go back there. I'll be right back with Andy McCarthy. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I've got Andrew C. McCarthy as my guest. That means we have 4 lawyers in the room, a prosecutor, a professor, and 2 pundits who talk on TV about the law. And Andy McCarthy is the best of them. So that between the 2 of us, we got one really smart guy. Andy, here's my concern. We are all prisoners of our own personal experience. For 10 years in L.A., I would cover the nightly news for KCET, PBS, and one of the recurring stories was gang violence at Peter Pitch's jail, so that we had to segregate the Bloods and the Crips and the Mexican Mafia away from these people, et cetera. You never mixed up gangs. So
Right.
we scoop up these people. We don't scoop them up. We arrest, detain, and deport over the weekend. I talked to Secretary Rubio about this on the air yesterday. Put them on an airplane. They go down to El Salvador. And my worry is that they send a bunch of Venezuelan cartel terrorists into El Salvador cartel terrorism land. Did we rendition some people into very, very, very dangerous circumstances, and is there a political downside to having done so?
Yeah, I think it's a significant risk. I thought Secretary Rubio, even though I didn't agree with everything he said, I thought he was very impressive in answering your questions. I thought the weak link, frankly, of his answers was, and I've seen this put to him before, whether these guys, these Tren de Aragua guys, if that's what they are going to be separated from these other gangs. And it seemed to me that he was basically saying, look, they know how to run their own prisons. And I hope that's right, because I want to just be clear on this. No one more than me would like to see these guys. I would draw and quarter them if I could. So I find it odd that I'm concerned about the deportations. But what I'm mainly worried about is blowback. That's going to make our jobs more difficult in protecting the country. And if they've sent people over there and something happens in that prison, that is going to be very bad. So I just hope that they set this up in a way that it's not going to redound to our detriment.
Well, that's exactly what blowback is, the technical term, and blowback has happened to America so much in the years of the War on Terror and indifference of the War on Terror that's one of those questions. I hope they had a meeting and at least talked about. We're sending it'd be like sending Zarqawi to sit down with the Shia terrorists, right? You don't mix terrorists up because they're going to kill each other, and then we'll get blamed for all that. So, Andy, what is your opinion of how the government is handling the case before the chief judge in the District of Columbia? They're not being cooperative.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. The thing is, if everybody's acting in good faith, prosecutors and judges serve different interests, and sometimes it's unavoidable that there'll be clashes. When it's an ordinary criminal case, the judge ought to come out on top of those. When it's a national security case, the default position ought to be that the Justice Department gets more leeway. But both sides have to appreciate that the other side has important American interests that it's vindicating, and everybody's got to be reasonable. And one of the ways that I think you make this work is by being honest. And I would rather have had the Trump, even if I didn't agree with this position, I'd rather have had the DOJ guy look the judge in the eye and say, look, you don't have authority to do this. We let the plane take off. We are not turning the plane around. Because that, I think, would at least tell the judge, I'm getting straight answers out of these guys, and I can at least trust what they tell me, even if I don't like what they tell me. And to me, that's the first step in an accommodation of some important...
That's wise. That's prudence. That's prudence, because we've got a situation now where I think the judge is embarrassed and angry and flailing because he did a bad job on Saturday. He didn't write it down. He wasn't clear. I can't read people's minds. You can't read people's minds. Have you ever heard of a proceeding like this where a judge kind of wandered in and said, turn the plane, and then left and didn't write anything down?
I haven't, but I've also never heard of a situation where you have 250 people who are actually in legal proceedings where they have a variety of rights and where the government stealthily sends them to one place and then all at once deports them to another country, to a prison in another country. And if that didn't...
well, isn't that what we did during the War on Terror? Isn't that rendition, but all at once?
There was a lot more to it. First of all, it wasn't 250. And the War on Terror, the thing that's important to distinguish between that and this is that there was a lot of congressional involvement in that.
Oh, yeah.
And there were a lot of statutes that were enacted,
I went back and read Boumediene after we talked last week, and we were right. Roberts was mad because of those statutes. He was mad.
Yes. Yes. And the thing is, Bush had much more statutory authority than Trump has. Trump's really on his own hook here, using a statute which is principally about declared war. I know what the other two provisions say, but I think that, I would be very surprised if this Supreme Court even comes to the conclusion that that was meant to give the president unilateral authority to declare that there's a terrorist organization, there's an invasion, he can scoop people up, and he can just ship them out of the country without judicial process. Even FDR had a declaration of war.
Yeah. Last question, though, Andy. You got a minute. What Rubio said to me yesterday, he's throwing the long ball. National security, I'm done here. That's it. I declared national security. You are preemptive jurisdiction, and we win. That's the long ball, right? Have we ever tried that before?
We haven't. I think, though, if that was what the play was, it would have been better to look the judge in the eye and tell him that's exactly what they're doing and not do it in stealth, because when you do stuff in stealth, it looks like you're in the wrong.
Unless they intend to do it again and again and again. It's a fascinating are you working overtime on Fox? Have they got you like on standby?
Now, this Rich Lowry, this slave driver, has so who's got time for anything else?
I got time for the Cavaliers. They lost 3 in a row, so we got to turn that around. And we got no starting pitching for the Guardians, so I got time for a lot of different things. Andrew C. McCarthy on X. Good to talk to Andy. Thank you so much for your time.